Alright, yo, what is up, guys? Today, we're back with another video, and we're reacting to a video called Grading Every 2014 NBA Draft Lottery Pick 6 years later. It's a video by Hoops Reference, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, Hoops Reference. There's a whole series of these. We'll probably react to the other ones that he made before this, but yeah, let's get into it, man.
I asked you guys for your input on whether this draft series should continue in the last installment, and the response from you was overwhelmingly yes. So, as requested, we're back. We now move on to the class of 2014, and this is a very interesting one to take a look back at, because at the time, it was one of the most hyped up classes in NBA history. The top of this draft supposedly had several future superstars, but as we look at it now, things have definitely not worked out that way for quite a few of the players, while others have actually proven to be pleasant surprises. Before we get started though, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, as all support is very much appreciated. Now with that being said, let's begin. Starting with the first pick in the draft, the Cleveland Cavaliers selected Andrew Wiggins. When the Cavaliers made this selection, they had a decision to make, because LeBron James had made the decision to return home, and he was obviously in championship-chasing mode, so developing Wiggins wasn't exactly in their timeline. The all-time great potential people thought Wiggins possessed at the time made it a very tough decision, but the team did ultimately ship him off to Minnesota for Kevin Love, which has proven to be the right move. Love played a vital role on the Cavaliers' playoff runs and 2016 championship, while Wiggins has established himself as a problematic, empty numbers guy who struggles on defense and doesn't exactly impact winning basketball. At his best, he can be a good scorer, but overall, he's nowhere near close to the player that many thought he could be. The fact that the Cavs traded him for Kevin Love actually does boost his grade though, because they got terrific value in return for him, so the final grade I'm going with here is a B.
I think Andrew Wiggins could still be good. Like, he's got so much athleticism. Like, he just knows how to put the ball in the hoop, man. That's ultimately what it comes down to. He can be a decent defender because of his athleticism and his wingspan and stuff. That stuff is gonna come. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't take much to, as long as he tries. He's on the Timberwolves. You don't really have any reason to play good defense. You're not gonna win the game anyways. So.
Next up with the second pick in the draft, the Milwaukee Bucks selected Jabari Parker. Parker was heralded as the next Carmelo Anthony at the time of the draft because of his size, elite isolation play, agility, and overall scoring package, which were very reminiscent to a young Carmelo Anthony. There was a ton of debate about Wiggins versus Parker for the top spot, yet when we look back on things now, we realize that neither have really lived up to the hype. However, for Parker, his disappointing career was much more out of his control, as serious injury has plagued him from very early on. He tore his ACL as a rookie, but did make a pretty strong recovery from it, and by his third season was a 20-point-per-game scorer, looking back on track. But then 51 games into that season, he once again tore his ACL, and since then, he just hasn't been the same player.
Can you imagine? Like, that would probably send me into like a depression or something. Like, you spend your entire life sleeping with a basketball. You practice, you train all your life just to get to the NBA finally, and you just get injury after injury after injury. Like, why couldn't it happen to someone else? Why did it have to happen to me? You know what I'm saying? Like, he probably feels like he's put in so much work, I'm sure. Man, that's horrible, man. I feel so bad for people when it happens like that. D Rose, Greg Oden, people like that, man. Brandon Roy, like, they're just injuries. That's the reason. That's the reason. Not because they couldn't. You know what I'm saying? Because they weren't good, just because of injuries.
Career has been plagued with injuries ever since. He's only really ever been a bench scoring option over the last few years, and his struggles in some areas balance out the decent scoring production. It's unfortunate, but the grade for this pick is a C. But who knows what could have been if not for injuries. Up next with the third pick in the draft, the Philadelphia 76ers selected Joel Embiid, who, ironically enough, was injured at the time. Had Embiid not been injured, he may have also been in contention for the top pick, but luckily for the Sixers, he fell in their laps. Since Embiid has gotten back on the court and started his career, he's been nothing short of a beast on both ends of the court, and now is arguably the best center in the entire NBA. He's one of the best defensive centers in the league, and the way he impacts the Sixers is glaringly obvious both by watching them play and is supported by advanced analytics. And then offensively, he's a tremendous scorer who can take pretty much any defender not named Marc Gasol one-on-one and score with ease. He's going to be the face of the Sixers for a long time, and the team really hit a home run here, so the obvious grade for this one is an A+. Next up with the fourth pick in the draft, the Orlando Magic, a defender not named Marc Gasol.
Wait, what did he say?
He's a tremendous scorer who can take pretty much any defender not named Marc Gasol one-on-one and score with ease. He's going to be the face of the Sixers for a long time, and the team really hit a home run here, so the obvious grade for this one is an A+. Next up with the fourth pick in the draft, the Orlando Magic selected Aaron Gordon. Gordon was kind of the Swiss Army knife of this draft class, whose athleticism, explosiveness, high motor, and good decision-making was very intriguing to scouts. In the last 6 years, he's become a very solid player and important part of the Magic lineup, who gives them a little bit of everything and throws down some fun highlight dunks along the way. But he's not necessarily a star or a top player at his position. His shot never developed to a level where he knocks down shots from the perimeter at a league average rate, and his role on the Magic seems to fluctuate a bit, but overall he is a good player. Taking Gordon this early in the draft wasn't a bad decision by any means, but it also wasn't great, so for a grade, I'll give this one a B. Up next with the fifth pick in the draft, the Utah Jazz selected Dante Exum. Exum was the top international prospect in the class, whose combination of size, playmaking ability, and defensive potential led people to believe he had elite overall potential. Such elite potential, in fact, that he was drawing comparisons to Penny Hardaway. However, like Jabari Parker, his career has been plagued with injuries year in and year out, leading him to miss significant time almost every year he's played. His offensive game, even now, hasn't developed all that much in 6 years, but his defense is solid overall. However, all in all, he hasn't come close to producing like a top 5 pick should, and unlike Jabari, he never even flashed the potential of future stardom at any point, so you can't really wonder what if. The grade here is a D, being more disappointing than others. Next up with the sixth pick in the draft, the Boston Celtics selected Marcus Smart. Smart's a player that you can't simply take a look at the box scores to understand how important he has become to the Celtics, because honestly, he's the heart and soul of...
He's part of their core, yo. Smart is part of the Celtics' identity, you know what I'm saying? He helps them, like, give them an identity, you know what I'm saying? They should retire his number. If he stays there for a long time, they should retire his number, because he just means like a lot to that team. You know, he's never like their best player or anything, but he just means like a lot to the team.
He plays his heart out on defense and is legitimately one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. And offensively, while he is very streaky, he's a big game player that shows up in key moments. Smart was a difficult prospect to analyze because a lot of what he brings is tough to mark down in a scouting report. But if you asked the Celtics if they would change their pick looking back, they wouldn't hesitate to say no. This one gets a grade of an A, being a very strong selection. Up next with the seventh pick in the draft, the Los Angeles Lakers selected Julius Randle. At the power forward spot, Randle got better every year in his Lakers days, and he got the exact opportunities he needed to develop with the team, because he came into the team at the time when they were still rebuilding. His scoring improved all 4 years with them, his field goal percentage improved all 4 years with them, and all along the way he was a strong rebounder. His strength was his biggest asset, and he used it to bully matchups down low and get to the basket. However, after 4 years with the team, the Lakers let him walk in free agency, shifting their focus elsewhere. Since he left, his numbers have shot up even more, but now, especially in New York, it seems like they are inflated by his freedom to take any shot he wants, and his poor decision-making at times can hurt the team's success. He's a good player to find in the middle of the lottery for sure though, so for this one also gets a grade of a B. Next up with the 8th pick in the draft, the Sacramento Kings selected Nick Stauskas.
F.
To this point in the video,
Not even
I'm just
legal,
going to come out and say that this was the worst pick made in the lottery. Coming out of Michigan, he was
I don't even
seen
know
as
what that
the
is.
sharpshooter of the draft, who actually possessed some underrated playmaking ability as an off-ball guard and secondary playmaker. But so many of his weaknesses got ignored that eventually got exposed at the NBA level. For one, he couldn't guard anybody well enough to justify giving him big minutes. He needed to put on more weight that he never really managed to do, and his lack of athleticism and speed limited his seemingly underrated playmaking ability. Plus, his shot didn't truly translate as well as everyone hoped, and at best, he was only ever an above-average shot maker from beyond the arc. This pick gets an F, and now 6 years later, he's not even on an NBA team.
Exactly.
Next up with the 9th pick in the
He
draft,
shouldn't
the
be.
Charlotte
He's not
Hornets
good.
selected Noah Vonleh. Around this time, the concept of floor spacing was beginning to be more important than ever, and stretch bigs as a result were in as high of demand as ever. Vonleh was one of the youngest players in the draft class, and based on what he showed in his 1 year of college, his upside was very intriguing because of his mobility, rebounding, and willingness to stretch the floor. His game was raw, but the idea of what he could develop into over time was one of a gem. Well, we're now 6 years into his career, and he hasn't really proven to be anything more than a fringe bench big man that hasn't improved much as a shooter and sparingly gets minutes. He also only lasted 1 season in Charlotte before getting traded away, so overall this pick didn't really work out well for them. I'm going to have to give this a grade of a D-, and I was very tempted to give it the F. Up next with the 10th pick in the draft, the Magic
He's on
traded up with
Portland,
the
I
Sixers to
remember.
take Elfrid
17.
Payton. Payton is an interesting player to analyze because he's relatively productive in some key areas, but also struggles mightily in others.
Why does he
For
look
one,
like
his
that?
three-point
I
shot
mean,
ranks amongst the worst in the league,
He looks so
which
weird
is
without that big
concerning
old
after
haircut
6
that he was
years.
hanging
But at
out
the
with.
same time, he is a pretty good passer of the basketball and has ranked well in assists per game. His time in Orlando was decent if nothing else, but nothing ever stuck out about him enough to warrant making him a permanent starting point guard. He's mostly put up decent numbers on bad teams, and realistically, should be a bench player for a team that wants to win. He, too, did not stick around after his rookie contract in Orlando, and the mediocrity of this pick nets it a grade of a C+.
It's not a bad player.
Up
He
next,
stayed
at
in the
number
league for a long
11,
time.
the Chicago Bulls drafted Doug McDermott.
Really? I thought Doug
McDermott
Derrick
took
was
the
older
country
than
by
that.
storm in college by being a bona fide walking bucket. He led the nation in scoring, was a lights-out shooter from
He
anywhere
led the
on the
nation in
court,
scoring,
and
and he
that
was the
production and
14th
hype
pick
resulted
or
in his
whatever.
draft stock skyrocketing. I mentioned earlier that Stauskas was the sharpshooter of the class, but honestly, between him and McDermott, it was 1A and 1B. In the NBA, things have died down a good deal for him, and he's settled into a role off the bench as a shooter pretty much everywhere he's played. Realistically, he probably never should have been taken in the lottery because his ceiling was always pretty low, but he does his role well. This one gets a grade of a C-, being decent but not worthy of a lottery pick. Next up at number 12, the Philadelphia 76ers traded down with the Magic, as mentioned earlier, to take Dario Saric. Saric didn't come
everyone
over
thought
from
this guy was
playing
gonna be
overseas
so good.
until 2 years later, but when he did come, he provided excellent versatility to the
Right.
team at the power forward spot. For a big man, he's highly skilled and can pass well for his position, score in the post, and shoot from the perimeter. He was a very good complement
He was
alongside
so
Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid.
In 2K17, him, Embiid, Simmons, Okafor, TLC, they all just developed. In career mode, bro, it was so annoying. Especially if you're in the Eastern Conference, or really in the Western Conference, because they usually made the finals. But if you're in the Eastern Conference and you face them in the conference finals, that's a tough opponent, man. Because they just progressed. They just got so good. Simmons, Embiid, Sarge, Okafor, yeah. They were tough.
During their first playoff run, and all in all, is an above-average player at the position. He did end up getting traded in the deal that landed the team Jimmy Butler, and since he left Philadelphia, he hasn't been quite as good, but overall his all-around game is valuable wherever he's playing, and for that, this pick gets a grade of a B. Up next, with the 13th pick in the draft, the Minnesota Timberwolves selected Zach LaVine.
Hey,
With
nice.
all of the players we've discussed so far and knowing what we know now, landing LaVine at the end of the lottery was like striking gold. At the time of the draft, he was still pretty unpolished offensively, but his explosive athleticism and untapped scoring potential should probably have been more enticing for NBA GMs. In his 3 years in Minnesota, his scoring improved tremendously every year, but then after that third year, he got traded to Chicago in a package for Jimmy Butler, where he is now
Everybody
a borderline
in
all-star.
this draft
After
got
once
traded for
being
Jimmy
known
Butler.
as just a dunker, he now puts up 26 points per game relatively efficiently and still gives the fans those highlight dunks they love him for. This one definitely gets an A+ grade because of the fact that in a redraft he would without question be taken much earlier. And finally, the last pick of the lottery was made by the Phoenix
Warren,
Suns,
really?
and with it, they selected TJ Warren. Warren is one of the most underrated players in the league, to be completely honest, and his production might surprise you if you haven't followed him closely. In his time in Phoenix, he developed into a near 20-point-per-game scorer, while shooting 50% from the field pretty much year in and year out, and his fluid mid-range game and isolation scoring ability make him perfectly built to be thriving as a third option on a team. The back end of this year's lottery proved to be pretty solid talent-wise, and to close things out, this pick gets a solid grade of an A-. And with that being said, that's all I have.
Yeah, someone like TJ Warren, he's underrated because like his play style is not fun to watch. That's the only reason. He's like Wiggins. He can put the ball in the hoop, but obviously like he can just put the ball in the hoop. He gets the job done. You know what I'm saying? He's not like you know what I'm saying? He's not like Zach LaVine where he just those long range threes and 360 dunks and stuff. You know what I'm saying? But he puts the ball in the hoop. That's all that really matters. Again, that's what it comes down to, man. So as usual, man, that's gonna cap it off. You know what I'm saying? It's a good video by Who's Reference. Original video down below in the description. Like, subscribe for this channel and my other channel. And I'll see you guys in the next video, man. Peace out.